He had already lost everything: his wife, his faith, his heart. On a brutal winter night in Boston, a lonely single father stopped to help a shivering stranger at a bus stop. What he didn't know was that this quiet young woman was the daughter of the man plotting to destroy his entire neighborhood. When the truth finally tears them apart, will love be strong enough to rebuild what was broken? Or does trust, once shattered, stay shattered forever? Stay with me until the very end of this story. Hit the like button and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled tonight. Let's begin. The snow in Boston that February night wasn't the kind you saw in Christmas cards. It came down sideways, hard as grit, the kind of snow that stung your face and got inside your collar no matter how high you pulled it up. The streetlights along Dorchester Avenue flickered yellow through the storm, and most of the shops had already locked their doors an hour early. Only fools and desperate men were still out at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. Liam Carter figured he was probably both. He pulled the zipper on his work jacket higher and hunched his shoulders against the wind, walking the 3 blocks from the auto parts store back toward his garage. The belt he'd needed had cost him $42 he didn't really have, and the guy at the counter had given him that look, the one people gave you when they were deciding whether to feel sorry for you or annoyed. Liam had stopped caring about either a long time ago. His truck was still in the bay back at the shop, up on the lift with its guts hanging open, a paying customer's transmission. The kind of job that should have been finished by 6 but had turned into a 9 o'clock kind of problem, then a 10 o'clock kind of problem, and now here he was, 32 years old, walking through a blizzard with a spare belt and the beginning of a cold, knowing his 2 kids were probably asleep already without him there to say goodnight. Mrs. Delaney from upstairs had them. She always had them, bless her. She'd been taking Mia and Ben to her apartment after school for almost 2 years now, ever since Rachel. Liam didn't finish the thought. He'd gotten good at not finishing it. He turned the corner onto the stretch near the old Fitzgerald building, and that's when he saw her, a woman standing at the bus stop by herself. The shelter was one of those newer plexiglass ones that the city had put in a few years back, but half the panels were cracked, and the bench inside had been ripped out after somebody kept sleeping on it. So there was nowhere to sit, nowhere really to hide from the wind. She was just standing there, arms wrapped around herself, her breath puffing out in little clouds that the wind tore apart instantly. She was wearing a coat, but it was the wrong kind of coat. One of those short, stylish ones, navy blue, with big buttons, and a collar that didn't cover her neck. The kind of coat you wore to brunch. Not the kind you wore when it was 19 degrees and the wind chill was dragging it down towards 0. Liam almost kept walking. That was the truth of it. He had his own problems. His hands were cold. The belt was digging into his hip where he'd stuffed it in his jacket pocket. He had a transmission to finish and Mrs. Delaney to apologize to for the 3rd time this month. But he slowed down. Something about her made him slow down. She wasn't bundled up hoping the bus would come. She was standing there like somebody who had been standing there a while and had stopped hoping and didn't know what to do next. Liam stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to speak, far enough that he wouldn't scare her. "The 18 doesn't come after 10, he said. She jumped a little, turned toward him. Her face was pale from the cold, and there were shadows under her eyes that weren't from the night. She looked maybe 25, 26, dark hair pulled back into a loose knot that the wind had been working on. Scrubs under the coat, he could see the edge of them, pale green. Hospital scrubs. "What?" she said. "The 18 bus. It stops running at 10:05 on weeknights. They changed the schedule back in November." She stared at him. He watched her process it. Then she made a small sound, not a laugh, something closer to a sigh that caught in her throat. "Oh," she said. "Oh, that's... okay. Where are you trying to get?" She hesitated. He saw her do the math that every woman in America had to do 100 times a day. The math of whether a strange man was a threat or a help. The math that was not her fault to have to do. I'll figure it out," she said. "Thank you. I didn't know about the schedule." "I'm not asking you to get in my truck," Liam said. "I'm asking because if you tell me where you're going, I can tell you if there's a bus that does still run. The 56 comes through in 20 minutes if you're going north." She blinked. Her teeth were chattering a little. He could hear it. "Brookline," she said finally. "I'm going to Brookline." Liam let out a breath. "The 56 won't help you much. You'd have to transfer twice. Takes about an hour and 15 from here at this hour, if it's running on time, which tonight it won't be. Okay? She nodded, more to herself than to him. Okay, that's fine. But it wasn't fine. He could see it in her face, the way her shoulders dropped a quarter of an inch when he said an hour 15, like the number had hit her harder than she expected. Long shift? He said. 12 hours. And then my ride flaked on me. And my phone is at 4%. She said it like a confession, like she was embarrassed to have the problem. My shop is around that corner, Liam said, gesturing with a tilt of his head. Carter Auto. I'm walking back there now to finish up a job. I've got a truck that runs, and I've got a kid at home who's probably wondering where I am, so I'm driving toward home when I leave, which is about 10 minutes from where you said. If you want a ride, you can have one. If you want to stand here and wait for a bus that's going to make your night worse, you can do that too. I'm not going to be offended either way. She looked at him for a long moment. The snow was coming down harder. A piece of it landed in her eyelash and she blinked it away. You have a kid, she said. 2. A girl and a boy. At home right now? With my upstairs neighbor. I'm running late. Something in her face shifted. Not trust, exactly. Trust was too big a word for what a stranger could give another stranger in 2 minutes on a cold street, but something softer than suspicion, something that let her exhale. Sophie, she said. My name is Sophie Bennett. Liam. Okay, Liam. She tried to smile and almost managed it. If you really don't mind, I would very much like a ride. The garage smelled like it always did. Old motor oil, metal shavings, the cherry-scented cleaner Mrs. Delaney had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago that he used exactly once a week to feel like he was keeping up. The fluorescent tubes overhead buzzed and flickered in that way that always made his eyes tired. The radio on the workbench was playing some late-night sports talk he'd stopped listening to hours ago. Sophie stood just inside the door and looked around like she'd walked into a cathedral. Which was funny because the place was a dump. Concrete floor stained in 20 colors, tools hanging on pegboards, an old couch in the corner covered by a blanket his daughter had drawn flowers on in purple marker. I just need 10 more minutes on this transmission, Liam said. Then we'll go. You can sit on the couch if you want. It's not much, but it's warmer than the bus stop. Thank you, she said. Really? It's a ride home. Don't make it a big thing. She laughed then, a small, real laugh, and it surprised him. She had a good laugh. A laugh that didn't match the rest of her, which was tired and careful and guarded. He turned back to the truck on the lift and picked up the torque wrench. He could feel her watching him, not in a weird way, in a way that said she had been alone for a long stretch and had nowhere else to look, and was grateful to look at something other than the dark. Who's the truck for? She said after a minute. Guy named Eddie. Drives for a moving company. He needs it back tomorrow morning or he doesn't get paid. So you're here at 10:30 at night because Eddie needs his truck. Eddie's got 4 kids and a wife on disability, and he pays me on time every single time. So yeah, I'm here. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That's a rare thing, paying on time. You'd be surprised. He bent back under the truck. He could hear her walking, slowly, the heels of her nursing clogs tapping on the concrete. She stopped at the bulletin board by the office door, where he kept the kids' drawings pinned up alongside the invoices and the calendar. These are your kids? Yeah. The girl's got her name at the bottom. Mia. How old is she? 8. Ben's 6. Mia draws really well. She does. Gets it from her mom. He said it without thinking. It just came out. The wrench slipped a quarter turn in his hand and he corrected it and waited for the follow-up question because there was always a follow-up question. But Sophie didn't ask one. She just said very softly, She's got a good eye. And then she moved on, looking at the next drawing, giving him the space. He didn't know why, but something in his chest loosened a little bit, like when you don't realize you've been bracing for a punch until it doesn't come. He finished in 9 minutes, not 10. He lowered the truck off the lift, wiped his hands on a rag that was already so stained another smear wasn't going to make a difference, and grabbed his keys off the hook. Ready? She was sitting on the couch now, knees together, hands in her lap. She looked even smaller than she had outside. When she stood up, she swayed just a little bit, the way people did when they'd been on their feet for 12 hours and hadn't eaten. When did you last eat? He asked, without meaning to. I had a granola bar at 4. Jesus. I know. There's a diner on the way, Dino's. It's nothing fancy, but they stay open till midnight and their grilled cheese is the best thing in the city. You want to stop? I really just want to get home. Okay. But thank you for asking. He shrugged because he didn't know what else to do with that. Come on, truck's out back. His truck was a 2004 Ford F-15. Oh, that had been red once and was now a color that could only be described as tired. The heat took a minute to kick in, and for that first minute, Sophie sat perfectly still in the passenger seat with her hands tucked up in the sleeves of her coat, and Liam felt bad about that minute in a way he couldn't articulate. He wanted the heat to come on faster. He wanted her to stop shivering. He wanted, he realized, for her to feel safe. That last one surprised him. He hadn't wanted anyone to feel any specific way in a long time. So Brookline, he said, pulling out into the street. What part? Near Coolidge Corner. I share a place with another nurse. You work at Beth Israel? Mass General. Long commute. It used to be worth it. The hospital, I mean. Now I'm not so sure. She said it like she was talking to herself. He let it sit. The wipers pushed the snow back and forth and the truck rattled over a pothole near the intersection, and a country station he hadn't meant to leave on was playing quietly from the dash. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you stop? He glanced at her, then back at the road. You looked cold. Lots of people look cold. You looked like you'd given up on the bus. She turned her face toward the window. The snow reflected in the glass and made little moving shadows on her skin. I had, she said. I was about to call my dad, or my dad's driver anyway, and I really didn't want to. Why not? She didn't answer that, not right away. Long enough that he figured she wasn't going to, and he'd almost started thinking about something else when she spoke again. Because if I call him, then he wins. And I've been trying not to let him win for a really long time. Liam nodded slowly. He didn't ask what that meant. He didn't have the right to ask what that meant, but he filed it away somewhere without meaning to. Well, he said, tonight he didn't win. Tonight a guy with an old truck and a used belt won. She laughed again, that same real laugh, and she pulled her hands out of her sleeves and rubbed them together in front of the heating vent, and for a little while the only sound was the wipers and the heater and the snow. He dropped her off in front of a brownstone on Beacon Street. There was a porch light on, and the front window glowed soft and yellow, and her roommate was probably inside on the couch watching something stupid and wonderful on television. Liam put the truck in park but left it running. Sophie didn't get out right away. She sat there with her hand on the door. I'd like to pay you for the gas. Don't. Seriously, you went out of your way. Sophie. He looked at her. He'd only just learned her name, but it fit in his mouth already. It's a ride. People used to do this for each other. It's supposed to be a free thing. She smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. Tired and a little crooked. And he noticed for the first time that she was pretty. Not in the magazine way. In the way where you could see her mother in the shape of her mouth and her father in the set of her jaw, and you could see the particular kind of kindness she'd been taught and the particular kind of loneliness she'd earned, all of it at once in one face. He looked away before he kept noticing. Well, she said. Good night, Liam. Good night. She got out, closed the door carefully, not a slam, walked up the steps, and the porch light made her hair look darker than it was. And then the door opened and someone inside said something and Sophie was gone, and he sat there for another second before he put the truck back in drive. It was only as he was pulling away that he realized he didn't have her number, and it was only a block later that he realized he hadn't thought to ask for it, and that was weird, because he had thought to ask for nothing from anybody for almost 2 years now, and suddenly, for the first time, he was aware of the not asking. He shook his head and drove home. What? Mia was still awake. Of course she was. Mrs. Delaney opened the door with her finger to her lips, whispering that Ben had gone down an hour ago and was dead to the world. But Mia was in the kitchen with a book open on the table and a glass of milk going warm beside her, because Mia did not sleep until her dad was home. She had not slept until her dad was home since she was 6 years old and learned, in the hardest way a child can learn, that sometimes people left and didn't come back. Hey, kiddo, Liam said. You're late. I know. I'm sorry. Transmission? Transmission. She marked her page with a folded napkin and looked up at him with her mother's eyes, gray-green and too smart. She was 8 years old, going on 45. Did you eat? I'll eat in a minute. You need to go to bed. You say that, and then you don't eat, and then you get a migraine, and then tomorrow's bad. Mia, I'm just saying. He sat down across from her and reached across the table and tapped the back of her hand with his finger. I will eat a sandwich before I go to bed. I swear on it. Go brush your teeth. Fine. She stood up, closed her book, drank the last of her milk in one swallow. Then, at the doorway, she stopped. Dad? Yeah. You smell like perfume. Liam froze. It was just a second, just a half second, but it was enough for a kid like Mia to clock it. I gave a lady a ride home from the bus stop, he said carefully. Her bus wasn't running. Oh. Mia thought about it. That's nice. It was cold out. She wasn't dressed for it. Okay. And then she was gone down the hall, and the bathroom light clicked on, and Liam sat there at his kitchen table at almost midnight on a Tuesday in February, and he realized his daughter had noticed a smell he hadn't even noticed himself. Something faint, something clean, shampoo maybe, or the kind of lotion hospital people used because everything else made them break out. He stood up and made himself a turkey sandwich because he had sworn on it, and he ate standing at the counter, and when he was finished, he turned off the lights and went into the bedroom and did not sleep for a long time. The next morning, Carter Auto was the same place it had always been, which was the problem. The building was 87 years old. The roof leaked in the northwest corner. The lift was a rebuild Liam had done himself from a second-hand unit he'd bought off a guy going out of business in Quincy. The sign out front had faded from red to a color closer to rust, and his grandfather's name was still on the bottom in smaller letters, even though his grandfather had been dead for 12 years and his father had been gone for 8. 3 generations of Carters had worked in this garage. His grandfather had bought the building outright in 1968 with money he'd saved from driving a cab and pulling double shifts at the Navy Yard. His father had expanded the back bay in 1989. Liam had taken it over at 24 when his father's cancer had stopped letting him hold a wrench, and he'd kept it alive through the worst years of his life by pure stubbornness and the mercy of the 80-year-old woman who owned the deli 2 doors down and refused to let him skip meals. He unlocked the front at 7:15. Eddie was already there waiting, bouncing a little against the cold. She runs? She runs? Oh man, Liam, oh man, you don't know. I know. How much do I owe you? $240 with the parts. Jesus, that's less than you said. Labor was less than I thought. Pay me $240. I don't do charity and I don't take extra. $240. Eddie paid him in cash out of an envelope, counted out on the workbench. He shook Liam's hand and his eyes were wet, and Liam pretended not to see, because that was the deal men like them had made with each other a long time ago. After Eddie pulled out, Liam stood in the open bay for a minute with his coffee and watched the street wake up. The snow had stopped overnight. The plows had come through. Dorchester Avenue in the morning had a different kind of loneliness than Dorchester Avenue at night. Fewer shadows, more truth. You could see how many storefronts were papered over. You could see the lot across the street where Mackey's Hardware had been, before Mackey sold it to a development group last spring. There was a chain-link fence around the lot now, with a sign on it announcing that something called Harbor Commons was coming soon, with a phone number and a logo that looked like every other logo of every other thing that was always coming soon to every neighborhood like this one. His neighbor, Ramon, who ran the barbershop next door, came out with his own coffee and leaned against the wall beside him. Ramon was 64 and had been cutting hair on this block for 31 years. His shop had been his father's before him, and his uncle's before that. In a different neighborhood, he would have been in the history books. "You hear anything?" Ramon said. "About what?" "About the lot. About the project." "Not since last month. Carla over at the flower shop got a letter yesterday. They want to buy her out. She said no. They said they'd be back." Liam drank his coffee. It was already going cold. "They're not going to stop," Ramon said. "I know." "You ever think about taking the money?" Liam looked at him. "Would you?" Ramon laughed, a dry laugh that sounded like gravel. "No, but I got no kids, Liam. You got kids. Money is different when you got kids." "Not this kind of money," Liam said. "This kind of money sounds like a lot until you try to live on it. Then it's just the last money you'll ever have. Ramon nodded slowly. He sipped his coffee. They were out here again yesterday. 2 of them, suits, taking measurements on the sidewalk, acting like we weren't here. Yeah, Liam said. You know who owns the company? I know it's got Bennett on the letterhead. Bennett. The name hit him a little sideways as he said it. He had said it before, probably dozens of times over the past year. Bennett Holdings. Bennett Development. The name had been on his mail and on his worry list and on the sign across the street for so long that it had stopped meaning anything specific. It was just the name of the thing that was going to try to take his shop. But now, for a second, the name felt different in his mouth. He didn't know why. It just did. It rang a small, quiet bell somewhere in the back of his head, a bell he couldn't quite place. He pushed it aside. It was a common name. Half the street signs in Massachusetts said Bennett on them somewhere. It was nothing. Well, Ramon said, whoever they are, I hope somebody tells them we're not going anywhere. Somebody will. Ramon clapped him on the shoulder and went back into his shop. Liam stood there a minute longer, looking at that chain-link fence across the street. Then he went back inside and opened the hood of the next car and started working. He didn't expect to see Sophie again. That was the honest truth. He had driven her home and she had thanked him, and that was supposed to be the end of it. Kind of thing that happens in a city. Kind of thing that doesn't usually come back around. But Thursday afternoon, at a little after 4, the bell over the front door rang and he came out of the office with a grease rag in his hand, and there she was. She was in her regular clothes this time. Jeans and a sweater and the same navy coat, which looked even thinner now that he knew what it was failing to protect her from. Her hair was down. She looked less tired than she had on Tuesday, but not by much. Hi, she said. Hi. So this is going to sound really stupid. Okay. There's a noise in my car. It's a little blue Honda. It's old. It used to be my cousin's, and I thought it was just an old car noise, but it's getting worse. And I don't actually know any mechanics in the city, and you're a mechanic, so I drove it here. It's outside. Liam looked at her for a second. He didn't say anything. He could feel a small smile pulling at one corner of his mouth, and he was trying to keep it from getting there. Sophie. Yeah? You said on Tuesday that your ride flaked on you. Right. You said you take the bus to work. Yes. So, do you or do you not have a car? A long pause. I have a car, Sophie said, but I don't like driving it in the city. I usually leave it at my roommate's parents' place in Newton. I brought it back yesterday because I thought of a reason to bring it back. Uh-huh. It really does have a noise. I bet it does. A real noise. I'm not making it up. I didn't say you were. She looked at the floor, then she looked up. Her cheeks had gone a little pink. Okay, I just wanted to say thank you for Tuesday, and I thought if I showed up with just like a bag of cookies or something, that would be weird. But if I showed up with a car that needed looking at, that would be normal. That would be a normal thing. So the noise, yes, might be real. It's possibly real, but also might be an excuse. It's possibly also an excuse. Liam let himself smile, finally. A small one. He couldn't help it. Pull it into the second bay, he said. I'll take a look. And Sophie? Yeah? Next time, just bring the cookies. She laughed, and it was that real laugh again. And he wondered how a person that tired could have a laugh that good inside them. And then he stopped wondering, because it wasn't his business to wonder. The car did have a noise. It was a real noise, as a matter of fact. A loose heat shield, rattling against the exhaust pipe. 20-minute fix. He didn't charge her for it. She sat on the couch while he worked, the same couch she'd sat on Tuesday night, and this time he'd made a pot of coffee and she accepted a cup with both hands like it was something precious. She didn't say much. She mostly watched. But every so often she'd ask a question that told him she'd grown up around men who worked with their hands, or at least around the idea of them. Did your dad teach you this? She asked. My grandfather did. My dad helped. They both worked here? 3 generations. That's really something. It's the only thing I know how to do. I'm not sure that qualifies as something. It qualifies. He slid out from under her car and looked up at her, because something in her voice had shifted. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was looking at the drawings on the bulletin board again, the ones Mia had done. It qualifies, she said again, quieter. To have a thing you're good at, and a family you've built it for. That qualifies as something. Trust me. He didn't know what to say to that. So he didn't say anything. He got up, washed his hands, tightened the last bolt, and told her the car was fine. She paid him $20 anyway, even though he said not to. She left it on the workbench under a wrench, so he couldn't refuse it. And then she asked, just before she left, if it would be weird if she came by sometime, not for the car, just to come by. And Liam, who had not let anyone new through the door of his life in almost 2 years, heard himself say, it wouldn't be weird. That night, after the kids were in bed, Liam sat on the edge of his own bed in the dark and thought about his wife for the first time in a long time without it hurting in the same old way. Rachel had died on a Sunday morning in April, 2 years and 10 months ago, in a way that had nothing to do with anything except a drunk driver on I-93 and a Sunday morning and bad luck. She had been coming home from her sister's place. She had called him from the road to ask if he wanted her to pick up bagels. He had said yes. He had said, get the everything kind. The kids like the everything kind. That had been the last thing he ever said to her. And for about 8 months after she died, he could not eat a bagel without crying. And for about 8 months after that, he could not eat a bagel without wanting to cry. And now, almost 3 years later, he could eat a bagel, mostly, and only sometimes did the sesame seeds get him. He had not dated. He had not wanted to. The idea of someone else in his kitchen, someone else in his bed, someone else touching his children's heads at bedtime, had seemed not just wrong, but physically impossible, like asking him to breathe underwater. He had put that door closed and locked and stopped looking at it. Tonight, sitting in the dark, he was aware of the door. That was all. He was aware that the door was still there, not open, not unlocked, just there, present in a way it hadn't been on Monday. He thought about a woman standing at a bus stop in a coat that was too thin. He thought about a real laugh that didn't match a tired face. He thought about how she'd sat on his couch and drunk his coffee and looked at his daughter's drawings and said it qualifies, in a voice that sounded, he now realized, a little bit like somebody who had not felt like they qualified in a long time. He thought about the name Bennett. That small bell rang again, a little louder this time, and again he couldn't quite find where it was. He closed his eyes and lay down. Outside, the wind had picked up again. A second storm was coming in overnight. He had heard it on the radio. By morning, the roads would be bad again, and Eddie would be driving somebody's couch across town, and Mrs. Delaney would have the kids' oatmeal ready at 7, and the world would keep doing the thing the world does, which is keep going, whether you are ready for it to or not. He fell asleep thinking of her laugh. He did not know, lying there in the dark, that within a month, a woman he had driven home one night would be sitting at his kitchen table on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee, and helping his daughter with long division, and that his son would have started drawing her into the family pictures without asking. He did not know that within 2 months he would come to understand what the name Bennett meant, and why that small bell had been ringing, and what it would cost him to hear it. He did not know yet what the word betrayal was going to feel like when it arrived at his door wearing a familiar coat. For now he only knew that a stranger had walked back into his garage on a Thursday afternoon, and he had not sent her away, and he did not know what that meant. He only knew that, for the first time in almost 3 years, when he fell asleep, he was not thinking about his wife. He was thinking about tomorrow. The second storm did come in overnight, and by morning Dorchester Avenue was buried under 6 new inches of the kind of snow that sticks to everything and makes every errand take twice as long. Liam was up at 5:30. He shoveled the sidewalk in front of the shop, and half of Ramon's too, because Ramon's back had been giving him trouble since November, and pride was the only thing stopping him from asking. Then he came inside and started the coffee and tried not to think about whether Sophie was going to come back. She came back on Saturday. He was under an old Civic when he heard the bell over the door, and by the time he'd slid out from the lift and wiped his hands and walked into the front, she was already standing there with a paper bag and 2 coffees balanced on a cardboard tray. "I brought the cookies this time," she said. "Like you told me to." "You brought coffee too." "I figured if I only brought one thing, you'd make me leave." "I wouldn't have made you leave." "Yeah." She smiled, a little shy about it. "I didn't want to take the chance." He took the coffee from her, and it was exactly the temperature of coffee you'd want on a morning like this. Too hot to drink fast, hot enough to feel all the way down into your chest. The bag had 4 cookies in it, the big kind from the bakery on Tremont, 2 chocolate chip and 2 oatmeal raisin. "These are my kid's favorite kind," he said, and then heard himself say it and felt something odd in his throat. "I guessed," Sophie said. "The bakery lady said these were the most popular with families." He wanted to tell her she didn't have to keep doing this. He wanted to tell her she didn't owe him anything. He wanted to tell her a lot of things, and instead what came out was, "You want to see what I'm working on?" "Yeah," she said. "I do." So he took her into the back, and he showed her the Civic, and he showed her the cracked motor mount he was trying to figure out how to replace without making the lady who owned it take out a second mortgage. Sophie sat on an upturned milk crate and watched him work, and she asked smart questions, not show-off questions, and after a while she said, "My grandfather used to do this. On his own cars, I mean. He wasn't a mechanic, but he'd been poor long enough that he learned how." Where was he from? Western Massachusetts, little town past Northampton. He drove a propane truck for 30 years before he retired. Is he still around? He died when I was 15. He was the one I was closest to, out of everyone. She said it evenly, but Liam could hear the weight under it. He let it pass without picking it up. He had learned, in the long years after Rachel, that sometimes people mentioned their dead the way you mentioned the weather, and you were supposed to just let them do it and not make a scene out of it. He sounds like a good guy. He was a better guy than anyone I'm related to now, by a long shot. That was the first time she said anything about her family out loud, and she said it like someone who had been carrying it for a long time and had decided to put it down for a minute on his workbench and see if he noticed. He noticed. He didn't say anything. He just nodded and kept working. After a while, she said, "Can I ask you a personal question?" "You can ask." "Your daughter, Mia. On the drawing, she signs her full name, Mia Carter Powell. Powell is my wife's last name, Rachel's." Was. Yeah. He could feel Sophie watching him, and he kept his eyes on the bolt he was turning, and she waited a beat and then said quietly, "You don't have to tell me anything. I was just curious about the name. I wasn't trying to—" "Almost 3 years," Liam said. "Car accident on the highway. Not her fault. Nothing anyone could have done. Sometimes there isn't a reason, there's just a Tuesday." "A Sunday," she said, almost to herself. "For my grandfather. He had a stroke on a Sunday morning eating toast." "Yeah." He turned the wrench. It's always a day that shouldn't matter. She didn't try to make it bigger than that. She didn't try to make it smaller either. She sat on the milk crate and let the moment be what it was. And then after a minute, she said, "You're raising them by yourself." "With a lot of help. I got a neighbor upstairs who saved my life about 400 times. And Rachel's mom comes down from Maine every other weekend. But yeah, day to day, it's me." "That's a lot. It's what it is." "No," Sophie said. "It's a lot." Something about the way she said it made him look up from the motor mount. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her coffee cup, turning it in her hands. Her thumbnail had a little chip in the polish at the corner. "You say that like somebody who knows what a lot looks like," he said, and he meant it gently, not a challenge. She took a slow breath. "I grew up in a house where my dad was always traveling and my mom was always—" She stopped. "My mom was always somewhere else, even when she was in the room. There was a lot of house and not a lot of people in it. So when I see a guy closing up a shop late and walking home to 2 kids, I know what that takes. That's all." "Your mom's still around?" "In Greenwich. We don't talk much." "And your dad?" A tiny pause, a small thing, but Liam noticed small things now in a way he hadn't a week ago. "He's around," she said. "We don't talk much either." He let it go. Some instinct told him not to push. He slid out from under the car and stood up and stretched his back, and he said, "Have you had breakfast?" "I had a banana." "Sophie?" "What?" "You got to eat actual food. You're a nurse. You know this." "I know. I forget. Come on. Dino's opens at 7. I'll buy you an egg sandwich. I owe you one anyway." "For what?" "For the cookies." "The cookies were my thank you for the ride." "Then the breakfast is my thank you for the cookies, and then we're even, and you can stop trying to pay me back for a ride that didn't cost anything." She laughed at that, and he washed his hands, and they walked down the block through the salt and the slush to Dino's, and that was the first Saturday. There were more Saturdays after that. She did not come every week. It wasn't that kind of thing, not yet. But she came often enough that by the end of February, the kids at the front counter of the bakery knew which cookies to put in the bag when they saw her coming, and Ramon next door had started waving at her through the window like she was somebody he'd always known, and Mrs. Delaney, who missed nothing ever, had started saying things to Liam in the kitchen like, "You need to bring me some more of that almond flour. I used the last of it on Thursday," in a voice that meant something else entirely. "I don't know what you mean," Liam said the first time she did it. "I know you don't, Liam, honey. That's why I'm saying it." "Say what?" "Nothing. Mrs. Delaney. I'm just making muffins. I need almond flour. I don't know what you're hearing." He bought the almond flour. He tried not to think about what she'd been trying not to say. The first time Sophie met the kids was an accident. That was the only word for it. It was a Wednesday afternoon in the first week of March, and the snow had finally started to let up, and Liam had picked Mia up from school himself because Mrs. Delaney was at a dentist appointment in Quincy. He had Mia in the passenger seat and Ben strapped into the back because he'd already swung by the after-school program at the rec center, and all three of them were on their way to the shop because Liam had a tow waiting that he couldn't reschedule. He pulled into the lot and saw Sophie's little blue Honda parked out front. "Who's that?" Mia said. "That's a friend. A new friend." Mia looked at him. The look was not an 8-year-old look. It was a look that had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Is it the lady from the bus stop?" "Yes." "The one you smelled like?" "Mia, I'm asking." "Yes, it's the same lady." Mia took this in. She undid her seatbelt slowly, like a person approaching a decision with caution. "Okay," she said. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I will meet her, because if I don't meet her now, you're going to be weird about it, and then it's going to be a whole thing." Liam stared at his daughter. His daughter stared back. Ben, in the back seat, said, "Is somebody getting a cookie?" Which was his way of entering every conversation he had ever entered since he had learned to talk. "Everybody's getting a cookie," Liam said. "Get out of the car." Sophie was in the front of the shop when they came in. She had a book in her lap that she hadn't been reading, and she stood up fast when she saw Liam had 2 children with him. And a particular expression crossed her face that Liam would think about a lot later. It was not panic. It was not even nerves. It was something more like the look of a person who had walked into a room she wasn't sure she was supposed to be in and had decided in that half second to be there anyway. "Oh," she said. "Hi. Sorry, change of plans. Mrs. Delaney had a dentist thing." "No, of course. Sophie, this is Mia and Ben. Kids, this is Sophie. Sophie's a nurse. She fixes people at Mass General. I fixed her car a couple weeks ago." "Hi," Mia said, in the careful voice she used for new adults. "Hi," Sophie said. "It's really nice to meet you." Ben, who was 6, and who had exactly 0 of his sister's caution, walked right up to Sophie and looked up at her and said, "Do you have a stethoscope?" "I do have a stethoscope. I don't have it on me right now, though." "Do you put it on kids' hearts?" "Sometimes I do, when they come to the hospital." "Can I listen to yours?" "Ben," Liam said, "I'm asking nicely." Sophie crouched down so her face was level with his. "I don't have my stethoscope with me," she said. "But if I see you again, I can bring it. And you can listen to my heart, and I can listen to yours. That's a deal." "Deal," Ben said immediately, and stuck his small, very dirty hand out to shake, and Sophie shook it, and Liam stood there watching and felt something shift in his chest that he could not immediately name. Mia watched the whole thing with the careful stillness of a cat deciding whether to come down from a shelf. She didn't smile. She didn't not smile. She filed it. Later, when Liam had finished with the tow and loaded the kids back into the truck to go home, Mia was quiet for most of the ride. Then, about a block from the house, she said, "She's nice." "Yeah." "Ben liked her." "Yeah, he did." "I don't know yet." "That's okay. I want to know more before I know." "That's very, very okay," Liam said. "You take as long as you want." Mia nodded once, like the matter was settled for now, and she looked out the window the rest of the way home. That night, after the kids were in bed, Liam sat at the kitchen table and texted Sophie from a number she'd finally given him about 10 days ago. He had thought about what to write for longer than he would have admitted. Sorry about today. Didn't mean to ambush you with both kids. Her reply came back in under a minute. Please don't apologize. Your son is a force of nature. Your daughter is going to be a federal judge. He laughed out loud at the kitchen table and then felt weird about it and then laughed again anyway. That's about right. Liam, can I ask you something? Yeah. Would it be weird if I came by on Saturday morning, not for the shop, like just to sit in your kitchen and drink coffee with you? He stared at the message for a long time. The fridge hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Mrs. Delaney's television was playing a movie from the 60s that she liked to fall asleep to. It wouldn't be weird, he wrote back. Come over. I'll make pancakes. She did come over. She came over that Saturday, and the next one, and 3 out of the 4 Saturdays after that. And by the end of March, Sophie Bennett had been in Liam Carter's kitchen more times than any other adult besides his mother-in-law and Mrs. Delaney. She was easy in his kitchen. That was the thing that surprised him. She didn't try to be useful in a fake way, the way some people did when they came into another person's house and started opening cabinets to prove they were comfortable. She asked where things were. She sat at the table and talked to Mia while he cooked. She let Ben climb into her lap during cartoons, and she didn't make a face when he spilled apple juice on her sleeve. She asked Mia about the book she was reading. They had both read a kids' mystery series that Mia was now working her way through a second time. And Mia, who did not open up for strangers, started opening up a little. Not all at once. Mia was not an all-at-once kind of kid, but by the second Saturday, she had asked Sophie if nurses ever had to help people who didn't speak English. And Sophie had told her about a patient who had only spoken Haitian Creole and about the app they'd had to use. And Mia had listened with her head tilted the way she did when something was being filed in the good drawer instead of the wait-and-see drawer. And by the third Saturday, Mia had pulled Sophie by the hand into her room to show her the shoebox where she kept her pressed flowers. Liam stood in the kitchen when it happened, wiping down the counter, and heard his daughter's voice coming faintly through the wall, explaining the difference between pressing a pansy and pressing a marigold. And he had to put his hand flat on the countertop for a second and breathe out slowly, because he had not heard Mia sound like that, light and sure and being listened to, in a long, long time. Ben, meanwhile, had made his decision about Sophie roughly 8 seconds after meeting her and had never revisited it. Ben liked Sophie the way a dog likes the person who feeds it. There was no suspicion, no reserve, no guarded middle period. By the second visit, he was climbing onto her back without warning and demanding to be carried around the kitchen. By the fourth, he had started calling her my Sophie, as in, my Sophie is here, as in, where's my Sophie going, as in, Dad, can we have pancakes because my Sophie likes pancakes? The first time he said it, Sophie's eyes went a little wet at the kitchen table, and she laughed it off and got up and pretended to need something from her bag. Liam pretended not to see. None of this was supposed to happen. That was the thing he kept coming back to, late at night, after she had gone home and the dishes were in the sink and the kids were asleep and the house was quiet. None of this was supposed to happen to him. He had made his peace with a certain kind of future, so hard but honest, narrow but steady, a life of doing the next right thing for 2 kids for the next 12 years until they didn't need him anymore. And then whatever came after that would come after that. He hadn't planned for a woman in his kitchen. He hadn't planned for the smell of perfume on his jacket after she hugged him goodbye. He hadn't planned for the slow and complicated fact that when he walked into a room now, part of him was always checking to see if she was in it. And he hadn't planned, most of all, for how much it was starting to hurt, because it did hurt. Some part of it. He didn't know how to explain it, even to himself, but there was a small, dull ache that had started up in him somewhere around the 4th Saturday, and it had not gone away. It wasn't about her. It was about him. It was about the fact that every good thing she did in his house, every pancake she ate, every song she hummed along to on the radio, every time she reached out without thinking and tucked a piece of Mia's hair behind her ear, was a small lever prying open a door he had believed was sealed for good. And every time the door opened a little more, he could hear a tiny voice behind it whispering, "If you let her in, you can lose her too." And losing her would not be the kind of thing you could survive twice. He did not say this to anyone. He didn't know how. Sophie, for her part, was going through her own version of something similar, and Liam, if he had been able to see inside her, would have been surprised at how little it looked the way he would have guessed. She was not tumbling into love the way women in movies tumble into love. She was not lit up. She was not floating. If anything, she was quieter than usual on the days after she saw him. She would get home to her apartment in Brookline, and she would sit on the edge of her bed in her scrubs, and she would stay there for 20 minutes before she could bring herself to take them off. Because every time she walked into that shop, and every time she sat at that kitchen table, she was confronted with a question she had been avoiding her entire life. The question was, what is a life actually supposed to feel like? She had been raised in a house where love was a transaction. She understood this now in a way she had not understood it at 12 or 16 or 20. Her father, Richard Bennett, had a voice that could strip paint and a smile he used for photographs. He had been building healthcare investment portfolios since before Sophie was born, and he had, over the years, built one of the larger private health services holding companies in the Northeast. He had also, over those same years, built a daughter who was a very good student, a very good athlete, a very good nurse, a very good public-facing Bennett, and who could not remember the last time her father had asked her a question he actually wanted the answer to. Her mother, Caroline, was a different kind of absence. Caroline Bennett was present at the right events, in the right dresses, with the right friends, and none of it touched her. She had been depressed for as long as Sophie could remember, though the word depressed was not a word anyone in her family was permitted to use out loud. Caroline took pills and drank white wine and lived inside an elaborate set of distractions, and she loved Sophie in the way that a person loves a favorite song they never actually listen to anymore. This was what Sophie had grown up inside of: big houses, good schools, ski trips, a credit card with no real limit, and a silence so deep and so constant that for most of her adolescence she hadn't even recognized it as silence, because she had nothing to compare it to. Nursing had been her first act of rebellion, not a loud one. Her father had expected her to go into the business, or, failing that, law or finance. Nursing had been, for him, a disappointment he could barely pretend to dress up. He had said, in the driveway of their house the summer before she started the program, "Sophie, do you understand the optics here? You know what I do for a living, and my daughter is going to be changing bedpans." She had said, "I want to take care of people." He had said, "You can take care of people by running the company that employs the people who take care of people." She had said nothing. She had simply gone and finished the program and gotten the job at Mass General and moved out of the Greenwich house the week after her 23rd birthday. She had thought for a long time that this was enough, that she had made her choice, that the choice had saved her. But she had not stopped taking her father's money, not entirely. She had not stopped showing up to the holiday dinners. She had not stopped being, in the most basic sense, a Bennett. And she had not, until the night she stood at a bus stop in Dorchester, in a thin coat and had a stranger stop to help her, understood what it was costing her to keep standing in both worlds at once. Because Liam Carter's world, small and tired and full of salt stains and secondhand tools, had something her world had never had. It had love in it, not performed love, not photographed love, not, "I love you, sweetie, now put on your dress" love. It had the kind of love that showed up as a man making pancakes at 7 a.m. on a Saturday because his son had asked for them. It had the kind of love that showed up as an 8-year-old bringing a stranger into her room to explain her flower collection because she had decided, after 3 weeks of watching, that the stranger was safe. It had the kind of love that was not said out loud because it was built into the walls. And Sophie Bennett, who had been raised inside marble and manicured hedges, was starving for it. She had not known she was starving until she had tasted it, and now she was. And she was terrified. She was terrified because she knew, in a corner of her mind she kept trying not to open, that she had not told Liam everything about her life. She had mentioned her father without naming him. She had mentioned her mother without describing her. She had said the word Bennett exactly once, on a Saturday morning when Mia had asked her what her last name was, and she had said it in the way a person might say any last name. And Liam had not looked up from the pan, and the moment had passed. She had not told him that her father's company was Bennett Holdings. She had not told him that Bennett Holdings owned the development arm that was trying to buy up his block. She had not told him because, in the beginning, she had not known. She had genuinely not known. Her father ran a dozen subsidiaries, and she did not read the business section of the paper anymore. And she lived in Brookline and took care of 6 strangers all day and did not have time to track her father's portfolio. She had put it together 2 weeks ago. She had been in his office, in the shop, looking for a pen, and she had knocked over a stack of paperwork by accident, and she had been picking it up when she'd seen the top of a letter. Harbor Commons Redevelopment. Bennett Holdings, LLC. And for a second, the floor of the shop had seemed to tilt under her feet, and she had stacked the papers very carefully back on the desk in the order she had found them. And she had walked out of the office and sat on the couch and smiled at Liam when he came in, and she had not told him. She had meant to tell him. Every time she had come back since then, she had meant to tell him. She had rehearsed it in the shower. She had mouthed it to herself driving down Route 9. Liam, there's something I have to tell you. Liam, you're going to hate me. Liam, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But every time she walked into that shop, and every time she sat at that kitchen table, and every time Ben climbed into her lap and called her my Sophie, the things she meant to say got smaller in her mouth. And she would tell herself, not yet, not today, not in front of the kids, not on a Saturday, not while he's tired, not while he's happy. And then the day would pass, and the moment would pass. And she would drive home to Brookline and sit on the edge of her bed in her scrubs and hate herself for 20 minutes, and then get up and do her laundry and go to work. This was the secret she was carrying in the last week of March, when she sat on Liam's couch after dinner while he washed the dishes, and Ben fell asleep against her shoulder with his thumb halfway toward his mouth. He's out cold, she called quietly toward the kitchen. Yeah, he's been fighting it for an hour. He doesn't want to miss anything. Smart kid. Too smart. Liam came in drying his hands on a dish towel, and he stopped for a second in the doorway when he saw her there with his son asleep on her. She watched his face. Something moved in it that she did not have a name for. Then he shook himself out of it and crossed the room and bent to lift Ben gently off of her. I'll put him down. Stay there. Water's hot if you want tea. I'm good. He carried Ben off down the hallway, and Sophie sat on the couch in the quiet living room and looked around at the walls. Family photographs in cheap frames, a painted handprint from Mia's kindergarten year, a wedding picture on the bookshelf that Liam had not taken down. Rachel, young and laughing, her head on Liam's shoulder. Liam, younger, grinning like a man who did not yet know what was going to happen on an April Sunday 8 years later. Sophie looked at the photograph for a long time. When Liam came back into the room, she wiped her eye quickly before he could see, and she gave him a smile she didn't quite feel, and he sat down next to her and the couch creaked, and neither of them said anything for a minute. Hey, he said finally. Hey, you okay? Yeah, just long week. What? I didn't say anything. You made an M noise. That wasn't a noise. That was breathing. She nudged him with her shoulder. He nudged her back. They sat there. The fridge hummed. Somewhere in the back of the apartment, Ben coughed once in his sleep, that thin, papery cough he sometimes got, and neither of them moved because the cough stopped on its own. Sophie, Liam said. Yeah. I don't know what we're doing. She held her breath for half a second. Then she let it out. Me either. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know the first thing about this anymore. I haven't had to know anything about this in a long time. I know. And my kids like you. I like them too. Yeah, but they like you in the way kids like people they're going to be sad about losing, you know? She closed her eyes. I know, she whispered. I'm not trying to scare you off, he said. I'm trying to be honest, because you've been honest with me, and I owe you that. The words went through her like a wire. Because you've been honest with me. She could have told him then. She could have said it right there on the couch, with Ben asleep down the hall, and the dishes finished, and his hand resting an inch away from hers. She could have said, Liam, there's something I need to tell you about my family, and he would have turned his face toward her, and he would have waited, and she could have said it, and they could have started from there. Whatever happened next would have happened, but they would have started from there. Instead, she said, I understand. I'm not asking you for anything. I know you're not. I just want you to know. He stopped. He looked at his hands. I just want you to know I'm paying attention. That's all. I'm paying attention now. I wasn't for a long time, and now I am, and I wanted you to know. She felt a tear slip down her cheek. She wiped it off fast with the back of her hand, and she hoped he didn't see. He saw. He didn't say anything about it. He just reached over slowly, giving her all the time in the world to pull away, and he took her hand in his. His hand was rough and warm, and there was a callus on his thumb where the wrench sat, and she closed her fingers around his, and they sat there like that on the couch for a long time without speaking. And she thought, I have to tell him. I have to tell him this week. I cannot hold this anymore. It is going to break something. And if I am the one who tells him, maybe I can help him pick up the pieces. And if somebody else tells him first, I will never see his face look at me like this again. She told herself Monday she would tell him Monday. On Monday, she went to the hospital at 6 a.m. and worked a 12-hour shift and came home exhausted and fell asleep on the couch with her shoes still on. On Tuesday, her father's assistant called her at 11 in the morning and told her that her father needed her at dinner on Friday at the house in Greenwich. No excuses. It was a family matter, and Sophie said yes because saying no to her father over the phone was a thing she had never successfully done in her life. On Wednesday, she meant to call Liam. She didn't. On Thursday, she drove to Dorchester after her shift, and she parked outside the shop. And she sat in her car for 10 minutes trying to make her hands stop shaking. The lights were on inside. She could see him at the workbench through the front window. He was laughing at something. He had his phone propped against a coffee mug. He was probably on a video call with the kids. Mrs. Delaney put them on sometimes when they missed him. Sophie put her hand on the door handle. She took it off. She put it back on. She took it off. She started the car, and she drove home to Brookline, and she did not go inside that night. And she told herself, Friday, after I see my father. I'll know more after I see my father. Then I'll tell Liam everything, all of it, all at once, in one piece. Friday night. That's when I'll do it. She did not know yet what was going to happen at her father's house on Friday night. She did not know that her father was going to slide a set of architectural renderings across a dining room table, and she was going to see, at the center of them, a photograph of a building she already loved, and a red X drawn through it in grease pencil by someone who didn't know what he was erasing. She did not know that when she asked her father whose shop it was, he was going to say, some Carter kid, third-generation holdout, small time. She did not know that the phrase small time was going to go into her like a blade, because it was the exact opposite of the truth, and her father had said it the way a man says things about people whose names he has not bothered to learn. She only knew, driving home through the slush on Thursday night, that she had let something go on too long without telling the truth about it. She only knew, pulling into her spot outside her brownstone on Beacon Street, that Liam Carter had said, I'm paying attention to her, and she had not paid him the same respect back. She only knew, sitting in her parked car with the engine off and the snow starting up again outside, that somewhere on the other side of the city, a man she was falling in love with was finishing his work for the night and tucking his son into bed, and not yet knowing that the woman in his kitchen had a last name, she had been very, very careful never to say. She put her forehead against the steering wheel. She stayed there a long time. Then she got out of the car, and she walked up the steps to her apartment, and she went inside and closed the door behind her, and the night kept going the way nights keep going, whether you are ready for them to or not. The house in Greenwich was exactly the way it had always been, and that was the problem. Sophie drove up the long curved driveway on Friday evening, and her headlights caught the same row of boxwoods that had been trimmed into the same severe shapes for every one of the 30 years of her life. And for a second, she had the feeling she always had when she pulled up to this house, which was the feeling of being smaller than she actually was. The house did that to people. It was built in the 1920s by a banker with more money than taste, and her father had bought it in the late 90s because he had grown up in a 2-bedroom ranch outside Waterbury, and this was what he had wanted when he was 8 years old and had not forgotten. The driver her father sent to the airport was parked by the front door. That meant someone else was here too. Sophie noted it, the way she noted everything in this house, and felt her shoulders tighten half an inch. She rang the bell like a guest, because in her father's house she was a guest, even at 30. Maria, who had worked in the house for almost 15 years and was the only person in it Sophie trusted, opened the door. Sophie, you're early. Traffic was lighter than I thought. Your father has a meeting in the study. He said to put you in the sunroom. Is my mother home? Maria's face did a thing that Maria's face did when the answer was complicated. She is upstairs. She is not coming down for dinner. Okay. I made the chicken, the one you like. Thank you, Maria. Maria squeezed her arm as she went past. A small squeeze, a nothing squeeze to anyone else. And Sophie, who had been pretending all day that she was not scared, felt her throat tighten for half a second. The sunroom looked out over the back lawn and the tennis court and the strip of woods that separated their property from the neighbors. The sun had just gone down. Lamps clicked on automatically in the garden. Sophie sat on the edge of a wicker chair that she had always hated, and she waited. Her father came in 13 minutes later. Not 15, not 10. 13. Richard Bennett had a talent for arriving at precisely the moment he wanted you to have stopped expecting him. He was 61 years old, and he looked 54, and he knew it. Silver hair cut close, dark blue suit, no tie, top button open, the uniform of a man who had nothing left to prove in any room he walked into. He had the Bennett jawline, which Sophie had also inherited, and the Bennett eyes, which she was glad she hadn't. "You look tired," he said by way of greeting. "Hi, Dad. 12-hour shifts still?" "Yes." "And you still enjoy that?" "I still do the work I went to school for, yes." He gave her the smile he used when she said something he did not intend to dignify with a response, and he crossed the room and poured himself 2 inches of scotch from the decanter on the side table, and he did not offer her any, because he never had. "I'm glad you came," he said. "You didn't really give me a choice." "I gave you the same choice I give anybody. You showed up. That's a choice." He sat down across from her in the chair that matched hers. He set the scotch on the little table between them. He looked at her for a long second with the look he used in meetings, the one where he was measuring what you were going to say next before you had decided to say it. "There's a deal closing," he said, "middle of next month. I want you to understand it." "Why?" "Because you're a Bennett, and because when the paperwork clears, a portion of the equity is going to come to you, whether you want it or not." "I don't want it." "Sophie." "I don't, Dad. We've had this conversation. I've been telling you for 7 years I don't want money from the company. And I've been telling you for 7 years that you're a beneficiary of a trust that was set up by your grandfather, and your feelings about the deals that generate its returns are not relevant to the trust's operation. I'm telling you as a courtesy, you can do whatever you want with the money. Donate it. Burn it. Buy a smaller apartment in a nicer neighborhood. I don't care. But I'm not going to have you find out about this one from a reporter." Something cold moved in Sophie's chest. A reporter. "It's a visible deal, in Boston, near your neighborhood actually, and the closing is going to attract attention because of the scale." He reached down to the floor next to his chair, where she had not noticed a slim leather portfolio sitting, and he lifted it and set it on the table between them and opened it. He spread out the renderings, and Sophie Bennett, who had spent the last 3 weeks rehearsing in her head how she was going to tell a man she loved that her father was the one trying to destroy his block, looked down and saw Carter Auto in a photograph on her father's table, with a red X drawn through it in grease pencil. For a second, she did not breathe. There were 6 photographs total, laid out in a grid. The flower shop where Carla had sent Sophie home with an extra rose last month because she looked sad. Ramon's barber shop with its blue and white pole. The deli where the 80-year-old woman who had refused to let Liam skip meals still worked the register 3 days a week. Carter Auto, the sign weathered and crooked. The empty lot where Mackey's Hardware used to be. And a long, wide shot of the full block from across the street, taken in the morning when the sun was hitting the storefronts just right. Every single building on the block had a red X through it. 11 parcels, her father said. 9 signed, 2 holdouts. It's going to be a mixed-use development. 400 units over ground floor retail. Medical office space on floors 2 and 3. We've already got a tenant on the medical space, a network that wants a community access clinic there, which plays well politically. The project is called Harbor Commons. Sophie could not take her eyes off the X on the Carter Auto photograph. "Who drew these?" "What?" "Who drew the X's?" "One of the guys on the acquisitions team." "Why?" "Just curious." "Sophie." She looked up. She made her face do the thing she had been making her face do her entire life in this room, which was nothing. "Keep going," she said. "There are 2 holdouts. The barber has been there forever, but he's 64 and his lease is month to month with a landlord who has already taken our offer. He'll move. He doesn't know it yet. The other holdout is the mechanic." "The mechanic?" "Some Carter kid, 3rd-generation holdout, small time. Owns the building outright, which is the problem. His grandfather paid $22,000 for it in '68, and now it's worth 8 figures in the right hands. And he either doesn't know that or doesn't care, which is making the whole project awkward." "Some Carter kid, small time." The words landed in her in different places, at different depths. Some Carter kid. As if he did not have a name, small time. as if a man who had kept his grandfather's shop alive through 2 recessions and his wife's death and 2 small children was a scale problem. "He won't sell," she said carefully. "He hasn't yet. He will." "What if he doesn't?" "There are ways of making the building less attractive to hold on to. Zoning is one. Permit complications are another. There's a gray area around nuisance violations if the building fails a couple of inspections. Nothing illegal, just friction. Most people sell when friction becomes expensive." She stared at him. "You're going to harass him out of his building." Her father sipped his scotch. "I'm going to offer him 3 times what the building is worth on the open market, which I already have. If that isn't enough, I'm going to offer him 4 times. If that isn't enough, I'm going to let the city do what the city does to buildings that don't get maintained, which is most older buildings on most older blocks. I'm not doing anything the market doesn't already do on its own. I'm just putting a thumb on a scale that was always going to tip. You're destroying a neighborhood. I'm developing one. Dad." "Sophie." He said her name the way he always said it when he wanted to close a conversation, and for most of her life that had worked. Tonight, for reasons she would not fully understand until she was driving home 3 hours later, it did not work. "What's his name?" she said. "Whose?" "The mechanic. The Carter kid." Her father looked at her with something that might have been irritation and might have been curiosity, and underneath both, the beginning of something colder. "Why?" "Because you just told me the name of every other business on that block, and you called him the Carter kid. So what's his name?" A pause. "Liam," her father said. "Liam Carter, 32, widowed, 2 children. One of our people did the background report. Is there a reason you want his name, Sophie?" She looked down at the photograph. She could have lied. She had been a Bennett her entire life, and being a Bennett meant being able to lie with your face very still. She could have said, "No reason, just curious," and her father would have let it go. For now. And she could have gotten up and gone to the bathroom and called Liam from the car before dinner was served, and she could have told him everything and beaten her father to the thing by about 3 weeks. Instead, she heard herself say, "I know him." Her father did not move. Define know. "I know him. I've been at his shop. I've eaten dinner at his house. I've met his kids. I know him." Richard Bennett set his scotch down very carefully on the coaster. "When did this start?" "February." "February when?" "The 5th. He drove me home from a bus stop during the blizzard. My car was at my roommate's parents' place in Newton, and my shift ran over, and the bus stopped running, and he was walking back to his shop, and he gave me a ride home. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know about the project. I didn't put it together until 2 weeks ago." "And when you put it together?" "I didn't tell him." "Why not?" "Because—" She stopped. Her father waited. He was very good at waiting. He had been doing it professionally for 4 decades. "Because I didn't want it to be true," she said finally. "Because I didn't want him to look at me the way he's going to look at me now." "Sophie, don't." "Sophie, listen to me." "Don't say anything, Dad." "I need you to listen to me very carefully," her father said, and he leaned forward in his chair and his voice was quiet and completely level, which was the voice he used when he was angry in a way Sophie was supposed to feel in her bones. "You are going to end this. Tonight. You are going to drive back to Boston tonight, and you are going to tell him that you cannot see him anymore, and you are going to do it cleanly, and you are going to stay away from that block until the deal closes. Is that clear?" "No." "Sophie." "No, Dad. This is not negotiable. I haven't told you what I'm going to do. I've told you what I'm not going to do. What I'm not going to do is stop seeing him. You're going to cost us this deal. I'm not going to cost you anything. I'm not on your board. I'm not on your team. I'm your daughter, and I'm telling you I am not going to stop seeing a man I have feelings for because you have decided he is inconvenient." Feelings. He said the word like he was holding it with tweezers. "You have known this person for 7 weeks. 8. 8 weeks. And you are going to throw over a family obligation and a $500 million project for a mechanic in Dorchester you've been eating pancakes with for 2 months. I'm not throwing anything over. I'm telling you, I'm not going to lie to somebody I care about." "Then don't lie. Tell him the truth." "Tell him the truth?" and end it and walk away. Dad, Sophie, I am trying to protect you. No, you're not. You're trying to protect the deal. I am trying to protect both. Dad, stop. You do not understand what this man's life is about to look like when he finds out. You do not understand what he is going to say to you, or how he is going to say it, or how long it is going to hurt. I have watched this pattern for 40 years in every industry I have ever worked in. You are a Bennett. You are going to be a Bennett after the deal closes, and you're going to be a Bennett at his funeral in 50 years. You are never going to be not a Bennett, and men like him don't. Men like him cannot love women like you for very long, Sophie, because the thing they love about you is the thing they think they are protecting you from. And when they find out that the thing they think they are protecting you from is you, they cannot hold both ideas in their head at the same time, and they break. They all break. Every single one of them. I have watched it happen my entire life. She stared at him. She had in that moment a very strange and very clear thought. The thought was, this is what my mother married. This is what my mother married. And this is what my mother has been drinking away for 30 years upstairs. And if I stay another 10 minutes in this room, I'm going to forget for the rest of my life that any other kind of man exists. She stood up. I'm not staying for dinner. Sit down. No. Sophie, I'm going home. And I'm going to tell him myself, tonight, before somebody else does, which I'm guessing was going to be you within about 48 hours. I was not going to call him. You were going to have somebody from the acquisitions team show up on his doorstep with a folder and a friendly voice. That is how these things are done. Yes, Dad, I know. That's how these things are done in your world. That's why I'm leaving your world. You are not leaving anything. I'm leaving this room. Start with that. She picked up her bag. Her hands were shaking. She did not let him see her hands. She walked to the door of the sunroom, and she paused, and she turned back. Dad. He was still sitting in the chair, holding the scotch, and for a second, in the low light, he looked older than he had looked in a long time. What? Don't do anything to his building. Don't send anybody. Don't pull any permits. Don't let anybody from that acquisitions team near his block until he and I have talked. I'm asking you, as your daughter, for once, for one thing, give me 72 hours. He did not answer for a long time. Then he said, I will give you 24. 48. 24, Sophie. That's what I'm giving you. And after 24 hours, I am going to do my job, and you're going to live with the consequences of what you have or have not told him in that window. And I will tell you one last thing, as your father, and not as the man who runs this company. I hope you are wrong about what he is going to say to you tonight. I hope he surprises me. He will not. She did not answer. She walked out of the sunroom. She walked past Maria, who was standing in the hallway with her hands clasped, and she squeezed Maria's arm the way Maria had squeezed hers on the way in, and she walked out the front door and down the steps and got into her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before she could get the key into the ignition. Then she drove. She drove the whole way back to Boston without the radio on, and the silence in the car was the loudest silence she had ever been inside of. She called Liam from a gas station in Sturbridge. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, Liam, what's wrong? I need to talk to you, tonight, okay? I'm in the car. I'm about an hour and 20 out. You want to come here. Can I come to the shop instead? Not the house. I don't want the kids to see. A beat of silence on the other end of the line. Yeah, he said carefully. Yeah, I can meet you at the shop. What time? 10:30. I'll be there, Sophie. Yeah. Drive careful, okay? Okay. She did not drive careful. She drove 85 miles an hour on the pike in a blue Honda that had been her cousin's. And when she got to Dorchester, it was 10:22, and the lights were already on inside Carter Auto, and she could see Liam through the front window, sitting on the couch, waiting. She parked. She got out. She crossed the sidewalk, and she pushed open the door, and the bell rang over her head, and Liam looked up at her, and she saw him see her face, and she saw his own face settle into the expression men get when they know something is coming and do not know what shape it will be in when it arrives. Sit down, he said. I want to stand. Okay. She stood in the middle of his shop with the smell of old oil and the cherry-scented cleaner Mrs. Delaney had given him, and she folded her hands in front of her because she did not know what else to do with them. Liam, my last name is Bennett. I know your last name. My father's name is Richard Bennett. He did not react. The name did not mean anything to him. Not yet. He just watched her, waiting. He owns a company called Bennett Holdings. A beat. She watched the color leave his face. He stood up slowly from the couch. Sophie. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. Not at first. My father has a dozen companies, and I don't follow his business. And when I met you, I didn't know what any of it was. I put it together 2 weeks ago. I saw a letter on your desk, and I saw Harbor Commons, and I saw his name, and I... 2 weeks. Yes. You've known for 2 weeks. Yes. And you sat at my kitchen table on Saturday. Yes. And you let Ben fall asleep on your shoulder. Liam, you let my son fall asleep on you while you were thinking about how your father was going to take my building. I wasn't thinking about that. Don't tell me what you were thinking about. I wasn't thinking about it the way you mean. Don't tell me what I mean. His voice had not gone up. That was the worst part. His voice had gone down into that flat, quiet register men used when they were trying not to yell and trying not to cry at the same time. And Sophie had a sudden, impossible memory of her father's voice doing the same thing in the sunroom 90 minutes ago, and she almost buckled under the weight of it. Liam, I came here tonight to tell you. I drove straight from my father's house. I fought with him. I told him I was going to tell you. He gave me 24 hours. Oh, he gave you? That's not what I meant. That's what you said. Liam, please. Please what, Sophie? Please what? Please let me tell you the whole thing. You haven't told me the whole thing? I've told you the part that matters. Oh, that's the part that matters. That's the part. Okay, so what's the part you haven't told me? She closed her eyes. She opened them. He's going to move on your building on Monday morning. He's going to offer you 4 times what it's worth. And if you don't take it, he has a plan to make the building unprofitable to hold. Zoning complications, permit issues, inspection problems. He said the words friction and the city does what the city does. I'm telling you this because you need to be ready. I'm telling you this because I am on your side. I have been on your side from the minute I knew there was a side to be on. Liam was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed. Once. Short. Not a real laugh, a sound that had come out of him because there was nothing else that could have. You're on my side. Yes. Sophie. Yes. You slept in my house. You played cards with my daughter. You let my son call you my Sophie. You sat on my couch and held my hand and said, you understood when I told you I was paying attention. And the whole time, since at least 2 weeks ago, you knew your father was the man who has been sending guys with tape measures to my sidewalk for a year. You knew, and you came to my house, and you looked me in the face, and you let my kids love you. And now you're standing here in my shop at 10:30 at night telling me you're on my side. Liam, do you have any idea what I was starting to let myself hope for? The word hope came out of him cracked in the middle. She reached for him. He stepped back. It was a small step. It was maybe 6 inches. It was the worst thing Sophie Bennett had ever felt in her entire life. Please don't do that, she whispered. Do what? Step away from me. Sophie, I don't know who you are. You do. You do know me. I'm the same person who sat at that workbench and watched you fix a Civic, and I'm the same person whose hand you were holding on Thursday night. You're the daughter of the guy who's been trying to take this shop from me for a year. I'm not him. You're standing in his shoes in my shop. I drove away from his house. I left without having dinner. I told him I wasn't going to stop seeing you. I picked you, Liam, an hour and a half ago. I picked you an hour and a half ago. Yes. An hour and a half, Sophie. I needed you to pick me 2 weeks ago. She had nothing to say to that. She had been rehearsing the thing she was going to say for 15 days, and in the end, standing in his shop at 10:30 at night, she had no defense, because the defense was the offense, because the 2 weeks were the whole thing. She sat down on the floor of his shop. She just sat down. Her legs gave out, and she sat down with her back against the workbench, and she put her face in her hands, and she did not cry, because she was past crying. Liam stood over her for a minute, breathing. Then he walked to the front window and looked out at the street. When he spoke, his voice had changed again. It was not flat anymore. It was tired. That was the thing she would remember later when she was going over this night, the way you went over a car accident. Not the anger, the tiredness. It was the tiredness of a man who had just been told that the first good thing he had let into his life in almost 3 years was also the most dangerous thing he had let into his life in almost 3 years. "I need you to go," he said. "Liam." "Sophie, I need you to go. I need to think." "Can I?" "No. No, you can't. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. I don't know when. I need to be with my kids, and I need to call my lawyer, and I need to figure out what I'm telling Ramon and Carla and Mrs. DiNapoli at the deli on Monday morning. I cannot do any of that with you in the room." "I'll help. I'll help any way I can. Let me help." "Sophie, please." He turned from the window. He looked at her sitting on the floor of his shop, and for a second his face did something she had not seen it do before, which was break. His eyes went wet. His mouth did a thing that was not a smile. He looked down at the floor and he breathed in and out once, slowly, and when he looked up again his face had put itself back together, but she had seen it, and she was not going to forget she had seen it, and he knew it. "I believed you," he said. "That's the worst part. I want you to know that. I believed every single word. You can still—" "I can't. Not tonight. You have to go." She got up. Her hand scraped the workbench on the way up. There would be a small splinter in the heel of her hand the next morning, and she would find it and leave it in. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle, the way she had stopped in his truck the first time he had ever driven her home. Except everything was backwards now. Everything. "Liam." "Yeah. I'm going to try to fix this." "Sophie, I know what I did. I know how late I am. I know what this looks like from where you're standing, but I'm going to try. And I'm not doing it for you. I'm not doing it to get you back. I don't expect you back. I'm doing it because I finally have something in my life worth doing it for. And I want you to know the difference, even if you never let me in this shop again." He did not answer. She opened the door. The bell rang, that same small, pretty sound, and she stepped out into the cold, and she did not look back, because she did not think she would have survived looking back. The door closed behind her. Inside the shop, Liam Carter stood in the middle of his grandfather's garage, under the buzzing fluorescent light, with his hands hanging at his sides. He did not move for a long time, then he walked over to the couch she had sat on the first night, the couch Ben had slept on against her shoulder, and he sat down on it, and he put his head in his hands, and he stayed like that for a while, in the quiet of the empty shop, and nobody saw him, and that was the only mercy the night gave him. Outside, Sophie sat in her blue Honda with the engine off. The snow had started again, small, drifting flakes. She watched them gather on the windshield, one at a time, until the glass was covered and she could not see him through the window anymore. Then she started the car, and she pulled out into the empty street, and she drove. She did not go home to Brookline. She could not be in her apartment tonight. She drove, instead, through parts of the city she did not know well, past shuttered storefronts and late-night convenience stores. And somewhere around 1 in the morning, she ended up parked by the water down in Southie, looking out at the harbor. She sat in her car, and she watched the black water, and she thought about the photographs on her father's table, and she thought about the red X's, and she thought about the 87-year-old building, and the 3 generations of Carters, and the little boy asleep on her shoulder, and the little girl who had pulled her by the hand to see a shoebox full of pressed flowers. And she made a decision. It was the first real decision of her life. She would realize that later. She had made plenty of choices before. Nursing school, the move to Boston, the apartment in Brookline, but she had always made them inside the frame her father had built around her, and she had always, in some corner of herself, expected him to approve eventually, and when he had not approved, she had taken comfort in the fact that at least he still paid the trust. At least she was still a Bennett. At least there was still a way back. There was not going to be a way back now. She was going to make sure of that. She took her phone out of her bag. Her hands were numb from sitting in the cold car, and she had to blow on them to get them working. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name of a woman she had gone to college with, a woman named Priya who now worked as a reporter at a city paper she did not have to name, a woman she had not talked to in 3 years. She typed a message. "Priya, it's Sophie Bennett. I have something I want to give you. It's about my father's company and a development project in Dorchester. I have the internal deck. I have the pressure tactics. I have names. I'm willing to go on the record. I know what I'm offering. Call me when you wake up. She read it 4 times. She did not change a word. She hit send. Then she put her phone down on the passenger seat, and she leaned her head against the driver's side window, and she watched the harbor in the dark, and she thought about a man sitting on a couch in an empty garage across the city, and she whispered something into the cold glass that nobody heard and nobody would ever hear. The snow kept falling. The city kept sleeping. And somewhere on the other side of Boston, Liam Carter finally got up off of that couch, and he locked the shop, and he walked home through the dark, and he went upstairs to the apartment, and he looked in on his children in their beds, and he stood in the doorway of Ben's room for a long time, watching his son breathe, and he did not cry. He did not cry because Carter men did not cry, not in their own houses, not where the children could hear. He stood there until his face had gone still again, and then he went into the kitchen, and he sat at the table in the dark, and he put his hands flat on the surface of it, and he stayed like that until the first gray light came up over Dorchester Avenue. And the day began again, the way days do, whether you are ready for them to or not. Priya called her at 6:40 in the morning, and by 8, Sophie was sitting across from her in a coffee shop in the South End with a flash drive on the table between them, and her hands wrapped around a cup she had not yet taken a sip from. Sophie, you understand what this does? Yes. To your family? Yes. To you? I understand. I have to ask you one more time because once I take that drive and I walk out of here, I can't put it back. Sophie slid the drive across the table. Take it. Priya took it. She put it in her bag. She did not put the bag down on the floor. She kept it on her lap, the strap looped once around her wrist. It'll run Sunday night, maybe Monday morning. I need the weekend to call your father's people and give them their chance to comment. That's how it has to go. I know. He's going to know it was you. I know. You want to call him first or let it land? Sophie thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. Let it land. Priya looked at her across the table. Priya had known Sophie since they were 19. Priya had seen her cry over a boy in a sophomore dorm and had seen her win an argument with a professor twice her age in a seminar room the same week. You're different, Priya said quietly. I know. It suits you. I'll let you know in about a month. She drove back to Brookline after that, and she slept for 4 hours on top of her covers with her shoes off, but her coat still on. When she woke up at 1 in the afternoon, she had 6 missed calls from her father and 2 from her mother. She did not listen to the voicemails. She took a shower. She ate 2 pieces of toast standing at the kitchen counter. Then she went to work the Saturday shift she had signed up for 3 weeks earlier because she was a nurse. And sick people did not care whose daughter she was. Liam did not call her. She had not expected him to. She worked Saturday and Sunday. She did not look at the news. She did not read the paper. She kept her phone in her locker. At 6:40 on Sunday night, the story went up online, and by the time she pulled into her parking spot in Brookline that night, she had 41 missed calls, including 12 from her father, 5 from the company's general counsel, and 1 from her mother, who had left a voicemail that consisted entirely of the word Sophie repeated 3 times in 3 different registers, followed by a long exhale, followed by the click of the phone being set down. Sophie deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest of it. She sat at her kitchen table in Brookline and she read the story in full for the first time. Priya had been careful. The piece was surgical. It named the project. It named the company. It named her father. It quoted from the internal deck. It quoted from the acquisitions memo. It quoted from 2 former employees Priya had apparently found in the 48 hours since Sophie had handed her the drive. And in the 7th paragraph, it named Sophie. Sophia Bennett, 30, Richard Bennett's daughter, and a registered nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, provided internal company materials to this reporter on the condition that they be authenticated independently. I know what I'm doing, she said. I know what I'm giving up. I've spent my whole life pretending I didn't see what my father did for a living. I saw it. This time I saw it, and I knew the people it was going to happen to, and I couldn't unsee it. Sophie read the paragraph 4 times. She barely remembered saying any of it. She must have said it. It sounded exactly like her. Her phone buzzed again. Her father. She let it ring. Monday morning came. The city came with it. By 9 a.m., 2 local news trucks were parked outside the Bennett Holdings building downtown. By 11, a second outlet had picked up the story, then a third. By 1, The company had put out a holding statement full of the words reviewing and mischaracterized and in due course. By 3, 2 of the 9 already signed property owners on Dorchester Avenue had called Priya back to say their signatures had been obtained under pressure, and they wanted that part on the record too. Sophie did not watch any of it. She had a 10-hour shift starting at 7 a.m. She taped a fractured wrist. She held a scared 13-year-old's hand during a lumbar puncture. She helped a woman older than her grandmother would have been eat a cup of lime gelatin. She did her job. She did it well. That was the only way she knew how to get through the day. At 4:15, during a 15-minute break she was not supposed to take, she finally looked at her phone. There was nothing from Liam. There was nothing from Liam on Tuesday either, or Wednesday. By Thursday, the story had swallowed a whole news cycle, and the mayor's office had put out a statement, and a city councilor from the Dorchester district had called for an emergency zoning review, and Sophie, walking home from the bus stop in Brookline on Thursday night, finally understood that this was what it was going to feel like now. There was no call coming. He had told her he did not know when, and she had to take him at his word. She was fine with that. That was what she kept telling herself. She was fine with that. She had not done any of this to get him back. She had done it because it was the right thing to do, and because for the first time in her life she had stopped waiting for her father's approval to decide what the right thing to do was. She told herself that exactly the way you tell yourself anything you don't quite believe yet, which is carefully and often and out loud when no one is listening. The snow came back on Thursday night. It was supposed to be the last big storm of the season, a late March blizzard, the kind Boston got every few years just to remind everybody who was in charge. By Friday morning, the whole city was under a travel advisory. Schools were closed, hospitals were running on skeleton crews, and Sophie was on the list. She had been at Mass General for 6 hours on Friday when her phone rang in her locker. She heard it faintly through the metal door during a bathroom break. She almost didn't check. She did. The screen said Liam. For a second she thought she was dreaming it. She hit answer. Liam. Sophie. His voice was wrong. It was wrong in a way that every nurse on earth recognized inside of one syllable, a voice tight and high and running thin. Liam, what's happening? It's Ben. He's having a bad one, a really bad one. He's been wheezing since last night, and the inhaler is not touching it, and his lips are... Sophie, his lips are going blue, and Mrs. Delaney called the ambulance 20 minutes ago and nobody is coming because of the storm. They said an hour, and he doesn't... Sophie, I can't wait an hour. Okay. Liam, listen to me. Are you home? I'm home. I'm in the truck. I'm going to drive him. I don't have anything else. Where are you exactly? I just pulled out of the lot. I'm on Dorchester, headed toward Columbia Road. Okay. Don't come to Mass Gen. You're on the wrong side of the river. The bridges are a mess. Go to Kearney Hospital. It's closer and their ER can handle pediatric asthma. You know where it is. Yeah. Liam, drive fast but drive smart. If he stops breathing, you pull over and you do rescue breaths. Do you know how to do rescue breaths on a child? Yes. Keep him upright. Don't let him lie back. Loosen anything tight on his chest. Talk to him the whole way. Keep him awake. Sophie, I'm leaving. I'm leaving right now. I'll meet you there. You're in the middle of a shift. Liam, I am leaving right now. I will be there in 20 minutes. Drive. She hung up. She ran back into the unit. She found the charge nurse, a 60-year-old woman named Doris, who had seen everything a hospital could do to a person. Doris, I have to go. A friend. His kid. Severe asthma attack. They're going to Kearney. Go. I know the staffing. Sophie, go. I'll cover it. Text me when you know. Sophie went. She grabbed her coat and her bag from the locker, and she did not change out of her scrubs, and she ran out the front of the hospital into the snow, and her car was on the 3rd level of the parking garage, and she took the stairs because she couldn't wait for the elevator. The drive to Kearney should have taken 15 minutes on a clear day. In the storm, in a Honda on bad tires, it took her 26. She did not remember most of it later. She remembered a plow truck blocking an intersection. She remembered a red light she rolled through because there was nobody around. She remembered gripping the wheel so hard her knuckles ached, and saying Ben's name out loud once in the quiet of the car, like a promise, like a prayer she did not have any other word for. She parked in the emergency lot, crooked and half on a curb, and she ran inside, and she saw them immediately in the triage area because Liam was sitting on a hard plastic chair with Ben in his lap, and Ben was limp, and his mouth was open, and Liam's face was gray. Liam, he looked up. Something in him crumpled a half-inch when he saw her. It was not forgiveness. It was not anything as big as forgiveness. It was only relief, the dumb animal relief of a man drowning who has just seen somebody who can swim. They said 20 minutes. They said 20 minutes and nobody's come. Sophie dropped to a crouch in front of him. She looked at Ben. Ben was 6 years old and small for 6, and his chest was working in that terrible way it worked when it wasn't getting enough. The retractions between his ribs pulling deep, his nostrils flaring, his color bad around the mouth and under the eyes. Ben, buddy, hey, my Sophie's here. Open your eyes for me. Ben's eyes fluttered. He saw her. He tried to smile. He couldn't. She stood up. She turned on the woman at the triage desk. How long has he been sitting here? Ma'am. I'm a nurse at Mass General. How long? 14 minutes. We're backed up. There are 3. He's a pediatric asthmatic in a severe exacerbation with cyanosis. He needs a bed and a neb now. If you cannot get me a physician in the next 60 seconds, I'm going to walk him into the back myself, and I will deal with whatever comes after. Ma'am, please, I need you to… 60 seconds. The woman stared at her. Then she picked up the phone. A doctor came out in 41 seconds. Sophie counted. He was young and harried, and he took one look at Ben and said, "Let's go." And Liam stood up with Ben in his arms, and they all moved fast down the hallway and into a room, and a respiratory therapist was already there setting up a nebulizer, and somebody was putting a pulse ox on Ben's finger, and Sophie, who had crossed the line from visitor to nurse the second the triage woman had not moved fast enough, was standing on Ben's right side speaking calmly into his ear, while Liam stood on his left holding his hand. Ben. Hey, it's my Sophie. You're going to feel a little cold spray on your face in a second. It's going to taste weird. Just breathe in and out like you're smelling a cookie, okay? Nice, slow cookie breaths. He likes cookies, Liam said. His voice was cracking. I know he likes cookies. Ben, cookie breaths. They got the nebulizer on him. They got the IV in on the second stick. They got steroids on board and a second round of albuterol and a dose of magnesium. And slowly, minute by minute, the wheezing softened and the retractions eased, and the pulse ox numbers that had been hovering at 86 crept up to 90, to 93, to 96, and the color came back into Ben's lips. It took almost an hour. At some point during that hour, Liam sat down in the chair next to Ben's bed, and he did not let go of Ben's hand, and Sophie stood on the other side of the bed and kept one hand on Ben's shin through the blanket, and nobody said anything to each other for a long time. When Ben was stable, when the doctor had said the words, "We're going to admit him overnight to be safe, but the worst is over," Liam finally looked up at Sophie across his son's sleeping face, and his eyes had that wet shine that happened when a man had been very close to the worst thing and had not, in the end, had to live through it. Sophie, don't. Not yet. Let's get him upstairs. Let's get him settled. We can talk after. Sophie, I know. Sophie, I know what you thought. I thought it too, the whole way over. Let's get him upstairs. They moved Ben to a pediatric room on the 4th floor around 7 in the evening. Mrs. Delaney came in a cab with Mia, and Mia took one look at her brother in the hospital bed and did not cry, because Mia didn't cry in front of people, but she walked over to Sophie and wrapped her thin arms around Sophie's waist and held on for a long time without saying anything. And Sophie, who had not cried in a week, put her hand on the back of Mia's head and pressed her face into Mia's hair and tried very hard not to come apart in a pediatric ward where other people's children were also sleeping. Mrs. Delaney took Mia home around 9. Ben slept. Liam and Sophie sat in the 2 chairs by his bed, and the lights in the room were low, and the monitors made their soft, reliable sounds, and the snow kept falling outside the window. I saw the story, Liam said, finally, in the dark. I figured. Sunday night. I saw it Sunday night. Okay. I've been trying for 4 days to figure out what to say to you. You don't have to say anything tonight, Liam. I want to. She waited. You didn't do it for me. No. You did it because it was right. Yes. You knew you were burning everything. Yes. He was quiet for a while. He was looking at Ben. Ben had a small hand half curled on top of the sheet, and there was a piece of paper tape on the back of that hand holding down the IV, and Liam was looking at the piece of tape. I'm not... Sophie. I don't know how to forgive exactly. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm not sure forgive is a word that means anything when you love somebody. I'm not sure it's about that. She did not answer. She did not trust her voice. What I know is, when I called you today, I didn't think about what you did. I didn't think about any of it. I picked up the phone and I called you because you were the person I knew who could help him. That was the only thought. You were the person I called. Liam. And you came. Of course I came. In scrubs. In a storm. From across the river. With your shift half over. You came. I would have come from farther than that. He closed his eyes. I know you would have. He reached across the space between their chairs. His hand was shaking a little, which she understood, because her hand was too. Their fingers caught. He held on. I'm not saying it's fixed, he said. I want to say that out loud. I'm not saying we're fixed. There's a lot I have to sit with. There's a lot I have to figure out how to stop being angry about. I don't want to lie to you about it. Okay. But when he was in my arms in that truck, Sophie, when his lips were going that color, and I was driving, and I didn't know if we were going to make it to the hospital in time, the only thing I wanted in the world was for you to be there. That was it. That was the only prayer I had in me. And you were there, and I'm not going to pretend that didn't change something. Change something for me too. Yeah? Yes. Tell me. She looked at Ben, asleep on the pillow. She looked at the piece of medical tape on his hand. When you called, and I heard your voice, and I realized it was Ben. Liam, I have never been more scared in my life. I have been scared as a nurse before. I've been scared as a person before. I have not ever been scared the way I was scared driving here tonight. And I think that's how I know. Know what? Know that you're my family. He did not say anything. Then he lifted her hand to his mouth and he pressed his forehead against her knuckles. And he stayed like that for a long time. And Sophie, who had not cried at her father's house, who had not cried in Liam's shop, who had not cried through any of the calls or the headlines or the days of silence, finally let herself cry, quietly, so she would not wake the boy in the bed. Outside, the storm softened. The snow kept falling, but gentler now, the worst of it over, moving out toward the coast. Inside the room, a monitor beeped its small regular beep. A nurse came in on her rounds, saw them holding hands over the foot of a sleeping child, and left without saying anything. Around 3 a.m, Sophie fell asleep in her chair with her hand still in Liam's. Liam did not sleep. He watched his son breathe for a while, and then he watched the woman next to him breathe. And after a while, he stopped being able to tell the difference, because they were the same breath. Because the air in the room was shared now in a way it had not been a week ago, and he was not going to try to put that into words, because some things were not words. He looked out the window at the snow. He sat with his family. Ben came home from the hospital on Sunday morning, and by the time the following week was out, the Harbor Commons project was dead in the water. 2 more property owners pulled their signatures. The city councilor from Dorchester held a press conference on the sidewalk in front of Ramon's barbershop. Bennett Holdings issued another statement, this one shorter, and the project was quietly shelved. Richard Bennett's lawyers sent Sophie a letter on heavy cream paper informing her that she was being removed as a beneficiary of the family trust. She put the letter in a drawer without answering it. The drawer was in a kitchen in Brookline she was already starting to pack up. Her mother called once from a hotel in Miami. It was the clearest Sophie had ever heard her sound. I'm proud of you, Caroline Bennett said, and then, before Sophie could say anything back, I'm sorry I never said it before. The line went quiet after that, and neither of them said goodbye, and neither of them had to. Sophie moved her things out of Brookline in April, a little at a time, in the back of her Honda. She did not move into Liam's apartment. That was not a thing either of them wanted to rush. She took a small place in Dorchester, 6 blocks from the shop, and some nights she stayed there and some nights she didn't. And the kids adjusted to the rhythm of it, the way kids adjust to everything, which is slowly and without announcing it. Mia was the harder one. Mia watched her for a long time before she let anything all the way in. There was a Saturday in May when Sophie was at the kitchen table helping her with a long division worksheet, and Mia, without looking up from her pencil, said, "Are you going to leave?" Sophie set down the pencil she was holding. "No." People leave. That's what I'm saying. I'm not mad about it. I'm asking. Mia, I'm not going to leave. I might mess up. I'm going to mess up a lot, probably. I'm going to say the wrong thing, and I'm going to forget to buy the kind of yogurt you like, and I'm going to be tired after a shift and not be fun. But I'm not going to leave. That's not on the list of things I'm going to do. Mia thought about it. She wrote a number down in the margin of her worksheet. Okay, she said. Okay? I believe you. That was all. She went back to her long division, but a week later she asked Sophie to braid her hair before school, and she did not ask Liam to check it afterwards. And Liam, standing at the stove making eggs, saw all of it and did not comment, and put his hand flat on Sophie's lower back on the way to the refrigerator in a way that meant everything that needed to be meant. The shop stayed. That was the other thing. It stayed, and it got better, actually, in small ways. The city, embarrassed by its own role in the whole mess, fast-tracked a facade improvement grant for the block. Liam used his share to fix the roof in the northwest corner that had been leaking for 6 years, and to repaint the sign. He kept his grandfather's name in the smaller letters at the bottom. He didn't change that part. They started the program in the fall. It was Sophie's idea, and it was Liam's idea, and by the time it was actually a thing, neither of them remembered whose idea it had been first, which was how the good ideas in a life together usually went. They called it Carter and Bennett Community Care, which Liam had argued about for a week before giving in. One Saturday a month, the shop did free basic repairs: brakes, belts, battery work, alignment for families referred through a list that Sophie kept through the hospital's social work office. And one Saturday a month, a volunteer medical team Sophie had pulled together from her own hospital, and 2 others set up folding tables in the front bay and did free pediatric screenings, asthma check-ins, blood pressure work, the small preventative things that fell through the cracks of people's lives when people's lives did not have enough room. It was not a big program. It helped about 40 families the first year. It helped about 100 the second. Ramon cut hair for the kids in the waiting line, no charge, because he said he was not going to be the only storefront on the block not pulling his weight. Mrs. DiNapoli at the deli sent sandwiches. Liam proposed to Sophie on a Tuesday night in their second summer at the kitchen table while the kids were asleep. No ring, no speech. He just said, I want to do this for the rest of it. Whatever the rest of it is, I want to do it with you. Sophie said yes with her mouth full of leftover ziti, and then she put the fork down and laughed until she cried, and Liam laughed with her, and that was how it happened. And neither of them ever told the kids a better version, because the true version was already the best one. They married in September in the back lot behind the shop. Mia made the flower arrangements out of the garden boxes Sophie had helped her plant in June. Ben wore a clip-on tie and lost it twice. Ramon gave a toast. Mrs. Delaney cried through the whole thing and did not apologize for it. Sophie's father did not come. He had not been invited. 6 years later, when Richard Bennett had a stroke in his office in Manhattan, Sophie would fly down alone and sit by his bed for 2 days, and they would not say much to each other, and at the end she would put her hand on top of his hand for a minute before she left. And that would be the closest thing to peace the two of them ever made. It would have to be enough. Sometimes Sophie would come to understand it was. The real thing, the thing neither of them could have told you on the night of the blizzard, is this. Love is not the thing that finds you when your life is good. It is the thing that finds you when your life has already taken too much, and then asks you, anyway, to open the door one more time. It asks you to believe with no evidence that the next person who walks through it will not take the rest. Most people, most nights, would not open that door. Liam Carter opened it because he was a decent man on a cold street who could not make himself walk past a woman without a coat. Sophie Bennett walked through it because she was tired and she was scared, and for the first time she had stopped being more afraid of what she was walking toward than of what she was walking away from. That is the whole story. A man stopped. A woman said yes. Neither of them was finished. Neither of them was perfect. They told each other the truth eventually, which is what most of us manage, eventually, if we are lucky and stubborn in the right order. Years later, when the kids were older and Ben was a lanky teenager who still called her my Sophie, when he wanted something, and Mia was at college in Western Massachusetts studying something that involved a lot of books and one very specific kind of flower, Sophie would sometimes come down to the shop at the end of the day to pick Liam up for dinner. She would stand in the doorway for a minute before he noticed her, and she would watch him close up, wipe the workbench, turn off the compressor, click the radio off. The same small rituals she had watched him do on the first night she had ever walked into that garage. And every so often, on those nights, she would think about the woman who had stood at a bus stop in a thin coat, shivering, almost calling her father. She would think about how close she had come that night to getting into a car she would not have come back from. And she would think about what it meant that, instead, somebody had stopped. Just stopped. For no reason other than that she had looked cold. Then Liam would look up and see her, and his face would do the thing it still did, even after all those years, the small, startled, grateful thing. And he would say, "Hey, you." And she would say, "Hey, you." And they would lock up the shop together and walk out into whatever weather the city was giving them that night. And they would go home.